Welcome to the Perinatal Wellbeing Podcast. I'm Christine, your host and certified perinatal mental health professional. This podcast is all about authentic conversations. We want to open up the discussions around perinatal health and well-being, from mood and anxiety disorders to breastfeeding to grief and loss in the perinatal period, and everything in between. While this is not therapy or medical advice, it is the place where we are going to continue to open up the discussion around all things perinatal mental, physical, emotional, and sexual health to help reduce stigma and break down these barriers to support. Hi, Anneke. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Christine. So wonderful to be here.
I am so excited. So on today's episode, we are going to talk about the realities and normalizing the realities of the physical impacts of pregnancy and postpartum. And this is a dream episode of mine because I am a blunt, honest, open person. I also love humor. So, I like to talk about things in humorous, blunt ways, and I've been dying to do this episode. So I'm super excited that we're going to do this together, Anneke. And so for anyone listening, just a content warning, we are going to be talking about all the things physical that can happen and that are pretty normal that we don't talk about, that might gross you out, or, maybe you don't want to hear it, or maybe there's people in the room that you don't want to be hearing it. So just know that if that's true for you, then you can switch to another episode or pause it for now. But we're just going to be very honest and open and talk about all the physical things that are not so glamorous.
No, there's nothing glamorous about this. I'm sorry. Just not happening.
No, exactly. And so Anneke and I are friends, and we were colleagues too, and we work together in this perinatal mental health space. And Anneke runs lots of groups and does a lot of peer support work and amazing work in the community. And Anneke has her own experience with bringing children into this world.
Yeah, I have 4 kids, and I think, I have 4 C-sections. So this is I think in this episode, I think we'll really stay away from the birth stories, because I think a lot of people keep so stuck on that. But I had C-sections, so it was rather uneventful, a planned C-section. You go in, they cut you open, baby comes out. But what happens before and after, we don't really talk about that, other than, this happened to baby if it impacts the baby, but it doesn't really when it impacts us.
Yeah, that's such a good point, actually.
Yeah.
So why don't you start me off? I'm curious to know, for you, what was the physical thing you experienced that surprised you the most? I mean, there's probably a lot, but what's something that really stands out for you that you just had no idea was coming and it happened and you were like, what is this?
The constipation.
Postpartum.
And it was, postpartum. And for me, because I am somebody who lives with constipation, if I change my diet, if I would go on vacation, I would just have to go buy plums, because otherwise nothing is happening.
Yep.
So, I have to eat my whole grain bread. Otherwise, there's just nothing happening. So I was kind of knowing that always, but how constipated it really is after birth when there is no baby, on that anymore. I cannot speak, I'm not a medical person, and you aren't either, so we cannot really speak to how that works, but just the feeling of how painful it was. And also it almost looked like that intestine tract worked differently or something, and the gassiness sometimes of it was really odd.
It was. And I totally agree. I had no clue that was a thing. And I even remember actually feeling terrified. So I delivered vaginally, and I was terrified to have a bowel movement after, because I just was like, what's going to happen here? Are things going to fall out? Am I going to tear open? I was also fearful of the pain, that it would be too painful. That was really honestly scary for me. This is not sarcasm. I was honestly really nervous about that first bowel movement post delivery
So
of what's going to happen.
yeah, so funny story because I always are a little bit constipated. Like since I was a baby, I would cry when I poo. So my mother would know, like my ears would be wet, like not crying because of the pressure thing. So my husband was always making fun of me. He's not going to listen ever to this, but
Okay.
he would always say, like, you would be best like birth because you like every time I do a number two, it's like a birthing process.
Right.
And I never had the chance to do it. I
Oh,
never had a chance to prove how good I am, but I get it. Like if you would be like if you would have a traumatic birth that it's also like just a birth that it's very painful in that, general area that you're just like, I'm not going to let go of anything because
no.
of what happened in
Yeah.
that. Like how is it going to impact? And nobody really
Talks.
prepares you for nothing like
No.
that.
And I mean, I have to say, like, I was really fortunate where I didn't tear and I like my deliveries were not very painful. And I still had that fear. So I can only imagine if like I did have a major tear.
Mhm.
And I, of course, have friends and family and people I know that have had major tears. I can only imagine how scary that actually would feel
But did
to
you ever talk about it with them?
know, never,
No, right? Like it's
ever.
so weird.
And even like, I did some reading and, some research and I knew about the body and, how this process works, but never read about, being afraid to go to the toilet after giving birth. Like never read about that, never crossed my mind that that was a thing, and never read about the constipation postpartum.
No, no.
And I think it's like, again, we're not doctors. I'm sure I've read, an explanation somewhere. And obviously hormones impact our whole entire system and everything that works
Mhm.
in our body. But like that's a major stuff going on when you are carrying a baby and deliver a baby and everything your body goes through. And also, I don't know about you, but like I totally like emptied out leading up to labor and delivery, like having diarrhea. And that was not something like
Yeah.
I knew about it, but like not really understanding like, oh, why am I having diarrhea like a few days before going into labor? As like your body's like emptying out, for delivery. So that's gonna have an impact postpartum, right? Like depending on how
Yeah.
that went and all those things. So I like it makes sense to me, but can we not be told this before
Yeah.
it
So I don't even like I know that a lot of people like who when they are in the birthing process, I never went through that. So I
right,
just know it from cows. Like I've
right,
seen it, happen with cows
right,
because I'm like that farmer. But anyway, I'm just
sure.
saying, like it's not really like when you say it, I say, yeah, it makes sense. But it's just, I think we are so, I think in the whole, and this is my whole passion about perinatal because we are often forgetting about the parent in the whole process. We will always talk about what's happening to the baby, how does it impact the baby, your belly is like this in the position, and how does it impact the baby, and how, and not so much unless it's the kicking. I think there's a lot of talking about, oh, pressure on my, this and that, and
Yeah.
always my stomach and those kind of things. But I think overall the impact on parents, especially postpartum, because prior, the baby is still part of that equation. Are you not eating enough because, you have heartburn, and that is then impacting the baby? I think it is kind of sad
Mm.
because, we are not talking about these things. And I think for me, having C-sections, and to be honest, I don't know what a vaginal delivery is like. And I had like very different healing processes with all my C-sections. And definitely my last one was like probably the longest one, as
Mm.
in, like the pain and the fatigue and stuff. Yeah, you're getting older, been there, done that. Like my uterus was see-through, so it was done. Like I cannot birth anymore. I
Right.
wanted to have 11, Christine.
Oh my gosh, Annika.
Not true. But
Oh, And there are big families out there. However,
No,
3
before
is
it,
enough.
it was taken away from me, kind of like
Yes.
I three was I was done with three, and then like four kind of happened. I didn't really do anything, so it was like, okay, let's do the four. But it was I knew I wanted, but like that taken away. But like having not a quote unquote like what people call a normal, but it's not normal because C-sections are pretty typical. It happens to a lot of people.
Yeah.
It's a little bit different, but I did find that still there's a lot of differences with between those. And with my second one, I had an incision that did not heal for 6 months.
Wow.
But now I'm thinking going back because, and my husband blames me, because I left the hospital after 24 hours. I was done. I couldn't stay. And he
Right.
was like, that's why it was open. But no, I think it was because they put staples
Right.
and I was allergic to the staples.
Oh my gosh.
And I did not know I'm like or had like an allergic reaction. So it was open. And then my OBGYN actually said, no, you're fine. It's just a little bit like, red, it's fine. And then my family doctor said, did you get staples? Do you mind if I get a look? And she said, no, this is not normal. I'm sending you back to your OBGYN. And then I it turned out that I had an infection also. And then they gave me antibiotics and they didn't work. And they gave me stronger antibiotics. So for the first 4 weeks, I was on antibiotics. My baby had constant diarrhea
Um,
and not growing. But they say, yeah, that's what happens because I was still pumping and dumping.
yeah.
And I think maybe I did a little bit of formula. I don't even remember. It's all like fake. But like then I had to go for 6 months to the wound doctor and it was not healing. And that meant like for the wound clinic, I had to go after every third day, but I couldn't take a shower until like 1 hour before I had the appointment. So I
Oh,
had a scheduled shower every third day
right.
at 5 o'clock in the afternoon because I could only go to the clinic after hours because they didn't want me to come in. I couldn't bring my baby because there were people walking around with rampant infections, open wounds, and everything.
Yeah.
So I could only come in after hours. And, Canada's health system, nobody's coming to your home anymore. So just for that, and it was not happening. And then finally, they sent me to a plastic surgeon, and he said, I don't know what to do with you. I'm just going to stitch it up.
Oh,
And
wow.
that was it.
That was it.
That was it. It was like a 2 centimeters that never closed. Like was just 2 cent. And then just he said, I don't know what to do. Like we did everything. It's just not healing. And he said, you know what? I'm going to take a gamble. I'm just going to stitch you up. And that was it.
And did that heal properly?
Yeah, I was fine after that. Can you imagine?
Right.
But it was like I felt so disgusted because like constantly like that wound is like oozing. It was a
Yeah.
very, very wet. It was smelling. It was I think I went through 5 months of feeling like utterly disgusted, like just constantly. And I
Yeah.
think we don't really talk about like baby was fine. Like after I'm done with the antibiotics and everything, baby was fine.
Yeah.
And I had another child. So we did two of us, of the three of us at home most of the time. Nothing really exciting, happening otherwise, but it's just that draining and that not feeling that your body is really working with you.
Yes. Yeah. Which I think we can apply to so many different scenarios postpartum, right?
Yeah.
Like C-section wound not healing, or stitches, like having stitches like post vaginal delivery, and if they're not healing, or there's a wound there. And then even applying that to things like nursing, right? Obviously, like all we can say, oh, I said my body's not working, my body's not doing what it's supposed to do, like,
Hmm.
and so for some people, if they've had an emergency C-section, or they didn't expect to have a C-section, and I've had clients who said, my body didn't work properly because I didn't have a
Hmm.
vaginal delivery, and it's like all this blame and shame, on like what we think it's supposed to look like. And I know we've talked about this before, and I probably talk about this every episode, but it's like, I think such a big contributing factor is that notion of like motherhood, and I'm being very gendered here, but like motherhood being this beautiful gorgeous thing that you love and you fall in love with, and you sacrifice your body, and you're happy to sacrifice your body, and you should be happy to sacrifice your body, and that it's like all beautiful because there's a beautiful baby, but it's not. It's
No,
gross.
it's
Like it's just gross.
it's
And
gross, it's scary. And we have to remember, like, this is like, we are pretty privileged to be able to even like harbor these, like, oh my gosh, motherhood is beautiful. Because for a lot of women, like, gendered language, but for a lot of people who get pregnant, who are not here, especially, who are not in a healthcare system, it's very scary because limited options. I'm looking at you, the US, like, when things go wrong, or when, it's not a planned pregnancy or a wanted pregnancy, or, in a lot of countries where the maternal death rates are pretty high still, where access to it is really a scary thing. Like, I think, and don't quote me on that, I'm not an historian in any way, shape, or form, but like, it was still a major, you know, reason why women in a certain age group were dying.
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And so I think that contributes to like, and I know I've said this before, but going into motherhood and like, having a baby, I thought that I would become, I still laugh at this like gentle, you know, lady who didn't swear, and like, the picture of like long flowing hair and beautiful woman and whatever. And I did have long flowing hair at the time. However, I didn't stop swearing the day I delivered. I didn't, become this like gentle woman who, like, I don't know, was like hyper feminine or something. It like, but so then when we have these experiences where like, oh my God, this part's really hard or this part's
Mm-hmm.
really gross, you
Mm-hmm.
think like I'm the only one.
Yeah.
Must be the only one that is experiencing it in this way.
Yeah.
Or I must be the only one that thinks it's gross or weird or whatever, right? Or like is
Scary. Yeah.
scary, yeah. Or is like regretful, like, oh shit, what did we do?
Mm-hmm.
Like I remember clear as day with my first, the day, like like maybe a week after he was born, I was like, we've made a mistake. We
Yeah.
shouldn't have had him. This is, what are we thinking? Like, and he was
I
planned.
still think that sometimes.
I think it way more now. We
No,
have,
and I think, and I read somewhere, and this is a little bit off topic, but I read somewhere that the people who have children understand child-free people, or people who, like, I know there's different ways that people, this community, more often than people who still have that desire to have kids but don't have children yet, to put it that way. And I think it really, it has taught me a lot about life, and this is like, I became a better me.
yeah, sure.
But I think it really helps to, like, you get very confronted with the limits of your body, and how, you know, a rather like natural thing has the effects on your body, because this is not something that, you know, a lot of people will not experience. A lot of people are giving birth every single day in whatever way, shape, or form. And I dare to put, like, say, like, constipation is probably one of the things that almost everybody suffers with. Bloated, and we just chatted a little bit about it before, like how your body just does the Kardashian thing and go back into, oh my gosh, it's working. Like, everything is like flat, and the bloatedness, the the changing, like you mentioned, the changing of the genitals, vaginal dryness, or vaginal dryness. Probably they say it like that. I don't know. English is not my first language. I wouldn't know how to say it in any other language. But yeah, sure. But these kind of things, I think, like, the breasts, if you're breastfeeding or not, or chest feeding, it changes. It's not going to be nice and perky.
Nope.
Like, gravity gets a hold of them. You're getting older too,
You
but
know,
it's not like,
yeah.
like,
It's
yeah.
not this like beautiful image, right? That we think it's supposed to be. And, for those of us who don't have like personal chefs and personal trainers and time to like the quote unquote bounce back, and I touched on that, I think, with Katie, but like, what does that even mean? Like, bounce back to what? Like, I feel
There's a lot of bouncing, but
no,
not bouncing back.
exactly. And it's like, can we embrace, like, okay, my body's changed forever, and I'm gonna try to like get, whatever, if that's a goal, but like to be healthy in this like new version of my body instead of like trying to get back to this thing that I can never get back because I can't undo having a baby. Like, and my body's changed
Yeah.
significantly because of that. One of those changes that really shocked me, which I wasn't expecting, was how I felt after delivery when there was no
Mm-hmm.
baby in my belly and your organs are just still in the same place because like right away they're not just going back to where they were, but there's no baby
No.
like holding all that in place tight. Anneke, like that feeling, like even to this day, still thinking about it now, like the first one was almost 16 years ago. It disgusts me. That feeling was
Yeah.
disgusting. I hated it. I hated it more than delivery. And I'm not exaggerating. I felt like I was going to be sick just from like feeling that feeling of like everything just floating around in there.
Mm-hmm. I completely get it. And I think, and also really, and like, I want to add to that, that every pregnancy is different. So a lot of the things that like, oh my gosh, I know I have given birth to two, or, like I have four, you have three, but then every time it's just like, oh no, it feels different. It is just like and again, it's nothing you really prepare for, and that floating around and then having that belly that used to be like kind of like there's some
Yeah.
tension on it, and now it is just living its own life kind of in a different way, that really creeped me out. And then you still have these phantom pains, like there is a baby inside there, even though it's not. Like your body is kind of like still in that stage, like forgot. Maybe it's a C-section thing. They kind of like forgot that there is no baby. Oh my gosh, I still feel kicking, but the baby is next to me.
Yes.
That's not possible.
Yes. And oh my God, that is such a good point. That was so super weird to me.
Yeah.
Also, again, I did read this in the book about having contractions. No one can see me, but I'm like doing the quotations, having contractions when you're nursing postpartum. But I didn't
Mm-hmm.
fully understand that, oh, like actual contractions where it hurts. Like I was like, am I in labor? Like I thought I delivered this kid. What is happening? I remember like it was painful. I had to breathe through it. I had to, yes,
Oh,
like I had to really
really?
be intentional about breathing through it, like relaxing my body, like same as in labor. But I think that it also felt worse because it's just like bam, like when I went to nurse, it would kick in. Whereas like going into labor was more like a gradual and like I'm going into labor, I'm gonna have contractions. I know this. Right. But the like I'm gonna nurse my
Yeah.
baby. Okay, I might feel something in my uterus, but I did not expect the actual like
Full
full
on.
on,
Yeah.
oh, I'm in labor here.
Yeah, and I think part of it is too, because I have never heard this, and I'm sure that I have met probably through this work and hundreds of people, and I've never heard, and
Yeah.
you're not the only one. Was like, but we're not really talking about it. But what I hear very often is like when they're experiencing like pains related to birth, but like after birth, doing things, it's also the pointlessness of it. Like, really, I've done this. I've done this a couple of days ago, and now I have, and what I heard a lot was that, and I haven't really experienced this, but I can imagine that it's almost like, when is this ever
Yeah.
going to
Yeah.
stop?
A lot.
Like, if I have this now, am I going to have it when I have
Right.
sex with my
Yeah.
husband?
Yeah.
Like, is this ever
Yeah.
going to go away? And I think that whole thing of and I talk a lot about compromising, because I think in a gendered world, let's just put it that way, like as people with uteruses and who are going through periods and hormonal things, like I think compromise is really part of being a woman or a uterus haver in this world. And that is something that a lot of penis people don't have to experience as much. Like we still have to perform, we have to do our exams when we are on our periods. We have to constantly do these things. But the whole how our bodies get compromised during pregnancy, postpartum, or even the
Yes.
conception journey, it is something that we don't talk enough about because it's really being
Yeah.
taken over. And we talk about people going, cancer journeys with chemo, and we have lots of, oh my gosh, that's terrible. And I'm not saying we should not talk about that, but there's a lot of like, I think I know more about a chemo journey, and I don't have, knock on wood and everything,
Yeah.
thank God. And, God forbid, I don't have anybody going through that in my close surroundings, but it is something that, somehow we're very aware of. But when I hear people when the conception journey, and I do come across a lot of people that want to share that in groups that I'm learning, I'm just like, why is this not
Right.
public knowledge? Why are we just not like, giving yourself injections and doing all this, measuring and all the levels, all the intrusive examinations that you have to go
Yeah.
through constantly. And when it comes to the male partner or the one who's producing the sperm, it's really just like, here,
Yeah.
sperm,
Yeah.
that's it.
And even if, like, in fertility journeys, even if it is the person who's providing the sperm, even if it's their fertility that is impacted, or that is quote unquote like the issue, it's still the
Yeah.
uterus holder who is having to still go through all the invasive treatments, right? For the most part. So that is really tough, right? And I hear you. And
Yeah.
again, it's like, yeah, we don't talk enough about that stuff and of like what it's like and the impact on us. And again, like
Mm-hmm.
it feels like it's part of that, like, mother as martyr, like, we say we don't want to, like,
Mm-hmm.
you know, uh scare someone off and like tell them all these things, like, so they're worried about them. And I understand that to an extent, but also, like, do we have to live in the dark and then all of a sudden we have a baby and
Mm-hmm.
we're facing all these things that we never heard of, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
like, either way, whether someone told me or not about contractions during nursing, I still experienced them. Like, it didn't make it
Yeah.
happen if someone had told me, because no one did, right? So I still experienced that pain, but unfortunately I was like kind of blindsided by it because I didn't know to the extent,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So this episode is a little different than, most of them, where we're kind of talking about like a certain topic or issue or whatever in the perinatal sphere. But just to kind of reiterate, like, Anneke and I are really talking about our own experiences and coming from our own
Mm-hmm.
experiences here. So we're talking like, you know, as women, who are both married to our husbands and the experiences that we've had. So it is kind of, we're kind of going down that path, but we both acknowledge and work with, people who,
Mm-hmm.
families look totally all different, and that's awesome. And yeah, so we're just like more on a personal level talking about our own experiences.
Yeah, and I think that's an important point to make, because I have worked with people in the past who have, are not maybe in more in different arrangements, but also like they're on the gender spectrum and not like women and how we identify. And I think it gets even harder if you sometimes it's a decision. If you decide to, it's not so much as like, oh, I really want this. If you decide to carry a baby full term, and then, dealing with, some of the limitations of your body, or maybe not like using your body in a way that doesn't really
Yeah.
affirm your gender. And I think that is something that, we're not talking enough about. But even and I want to say, you know, not saying that that's not valid and not really affirming that's really hard, but I found even for myself that I'm just sometimes, already having a quite good sized boobs and getting them bigger. And I'm just like, yeah, no, thank you. Like it's not really important to me. Um, not saying that my looks, I'm definitely not somebody who uses a lot of makeup or puts a lot of sense into being, but I'm just like,
Right.
but what now? Like, what is this body of me now? And why, people say, oh my gosh, you must be so happy. And I'm just like, no, I'm very body neutral. I think that's the thing for me. I think I'm very body neutral and I really want to be that. I don't want to be very body positive because I just
Right.
cannot relate
Yeah.
to
Which is
that. I'm really working on the function of my body. And I think that is kind of related to like that whole gender thing as well. As women, we should embrace our bodies and we should be happy with the big bellies. And I'm just like, nope, I'm just carrying
yeah.
a baby in here. I don't want to have, how does people have this imprint of, and do this like pictures? I don't want to do that. I don't have
No,
pictures
I
of
have
me pregnant.
very little. Yeah, and I hear you, right? Like it's okay for us to actually feel, yeah, body neutral, but even body neutral specific to pregnancy, like even feeling neutral about being pregnant.
Mhm.
And it's also okay for us to like hate being pregnant, hate changes in our body.
Yeah.
I always say depending on how it impacts you, right? I think that's my therapist part coming out of
Mhm.
like, if we're pregnant and we're hating on ourselves, and that means that maybe we're, not taking care of ourselves. And I don't mean because there's a baby in there. No, just if it means you don't take care of yourself or you develop this like really unhealthy relationship with yourself where maybe some type of harm comes
Mhm.
from that, whether it's like physical or emotional, mental harm, right? Like, that's not something I would wish for anyone. But we don't have to love being pregnant. We don't have, and we can love that we're having a baby, or like, for example, all three of mine were planned pregnancies. And there was lots of things that I liked about pregnancy personally. And there were things that I did not like. So it's also not an all or nothing
Mhm.
either, right? But of course, like for some people who are like sick, like super sick and nauseous the whole time, like what is fun about that? There's nothing fun about that.
No.
Like, and it's so interesting. I'm just backtracking a second, but people saying like, oh, like, are you so excited about your boobs and whatever? Like, why? Because you're a woman, so you should want to have big boobs? Like, what? Like that,
Yeah.
this is again, like all of this impact, even if it was women making those comments, right? But like we're all impacted by these gender stereotypes and these like expectations on us as like what our femininity means and what that should look like and how we should present. And big boobs means being super feminine. And like for me, I've always been on the smaller side, like just my breasts, not the rest.
You want
Sure,
some?
let's share. But it's like, but then for me, I was like, oh, like that's probably why I couldn't, nurse my kids. So because I have small boobs and they don't work, I'm not feminine
Yeah.
enough, right? So it's like we're screwed no matter what,
Mhm.
right? Like we
Yeah.
can never win.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that is the whole thing, is that there is a very narrow stereotype in which you almost have to fit in to, you know, be like a
Yeah.
content mother who is like embracing everything, and like that
Yes.
martyr thing. And that's why I have a huge difficulty with like the superhero mom and the superhero parents who are just doing everything, because it's just not sustainable, and we're missing a lot of people by not providing them with the help and the support that they, need and deserve. And just having those conversations around it really sucks. It is not, like, yes, and for a lot of us, like, we're really looking forward to having the baby, but pregnancies aren't medical emergencies for most people either. Like, you're able to, but at the same time, with all the options that we have, with all the, are you doing, the 12-week scan? Are you doing this? Are you doing that? Are you stopping drinking caffeine or not? Like, there's a lot of judgment. I hear a lot of people saying, I don't want to drink my coffee in public anymore because I have people looking at me. I don't want to drink something that looks like wine, even though I love my non-alcoholic wine. Like these kind of things, or people that cannot stop smoking because it would just bring too much trauma to them, and then in public. And these are things that, for those who are not carrying the baby, who are not the birthing parents, they never have to think about that. They can do whatever they
Yes.
want. They can go in the club, they can use all the drugs that they want, to partake in all kind of activities that would be frowned upon if you're there with a belly, even if you're not doing anything that directly harms baby.
Yeah, because if you're not carrying, like if you're not the one pregnant, then no one has to know about it unless you tell them, unless you choose to, right? Where for us,
Or wear t-shirts.
right, yeah, where like if, being the pregnant person in my relationship, right, it's like I had to tell work, I had to take the sick time off if, I had appointments, or obviously all of those appointments throughout.
Yeah, you cannot show up. You cannot not show up.
Yeah,
Like there's
yeah.
just simply not an appointment without you.
Yeah, exactly. And so it does have a big impact on our lives and our careers, right? And of course, like there can be options sometimes, but for example, like my husband didn't work in a workplace where he had access to paternity leave. So
Yeah.
even if I wanted him to like take that time off, it wasn't an option. So my career was the one that was interrupted, for a year.
Yeah, but my husband took the time off, and even then, he is not dealing with, the 6 weeks of
Right.
intermittent bleeding. He is not dealing with, your body temperature fluctuating, last weeks of, I don't know if you like last weeks of pregnancy or last months of pregnancy, really, but even postpartum, that you're constantly like your body just, because it like all those folds of the extra things that are suddenly not necessary, and it's like sweaty and oozing, and then it's baby drooling all over you. I was only breastfeeding with, like the first one I was exclusively pumping, and I tried to introduce the formula. Kid didn't want it, so I was stuck there till 13 months with a hand pump.
Oh my
Christine,
gosh.
I don't know how I did. Like it's just these kind of things. Like I was in my mid-20s. I did not think about these things. I did not think about the options. It was just like I had no energy for it. I was just like, okay, I'm starting this, but I'm going to go back to, breastfeeding on the nipple or whatever. I don't know how they call that. Just a breastfeeding. And it never just really happened. So I was just like, okay, the pump broke. I will just buy a new one because now I can do it. And it wasn't really because she was the eldest, I was able to do that. But these things that, my husband wasn't off then, but with other kids, he was, yes, he was off more, but still, like,
It's not the same.
I'm not saying that he not supported me, like
Same.
support me in many ways. And it was great to have him home, and it was great to have that support. But at the same time, not feeling comfortable when you're laying down, like really feeling that parts of you are broken, not being able to sleep because your belly is in the way, or your belly is just gone and you just now not know how to lay down anymore, and everything feels like you're squishing, you're constantly hot, you're cold, you're constantly thinking something wrong with me. And then there comes that moment that you want to get intimate again, and then it's just like it doesn't feel good, at least for me. And I never thought of that too. I never had like a let's get back to intimacy plan. And now I'm just like, I tell a lot of people, I'm just saying, act like dating, just really work through
Yep.
the bases again, really explore like holding hands, explore kissing, explore like touching, explore that again, because you need some time to get that. Like, and of course, there's people that have very healthy and I'm not saying not unhealthy, but very satisfying sex lives, all the time, and they never really stop with that. So that might not be an issue. But I think for the vast majority of us, I think it is for both partners involved. It's a kind of a time when it's kind of like slows down a little bit. Baby might be in the room with you or on you the whole time. You're touched out at the end of the day. And I think that is one of the hardest parts that people don't prepare you for as well, is to have to be at all. And then that body function part of it, that you're just like, yes, I want to be intimate. I want to be, I want to have sex with you again. But there is that creature that is like dependent on milk, or dependent on on being on my body, or I'm just drooled over, or I cannot take a shower because, hey, it's not Tuesday, I have an appointment at Tuesday, and I'm Muslim, so we have to have a shower after. So that's a hard part. Like, these are all things that you don't really plan around, and we don't talk about it. And then I hear people that saying like, we haven't had sex for like years, and I'm just like, that is sad in a way, I think. And especially when they're talking about, like, we used to be like great, like some people just don't have a whole lot of, but like people that are saying it in a regretful way. And I always have to say, like, it's not penis and vagina only. You can do many things.
Yeah, absolutely. And I encourage anyone who's like, this is piquing my interest, also go back and listen to the episode with Benet.
Benet is amazing.
Oh my gosh, so amazing about postpartum sexuality. Because you're right, Anneke, like that intimacy piece, right? Especially for like heterosexual, cisgendered couples, where it's like, the assumption again of like, it has to be penis and vagina sex.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't. We can all get pleasure in many different ways. The world does not revolve around the penis. And so we can work up to, and I think that is important to even just knowing that, because I think that sometimes like this big fear can develop, and I'm speaking personally, and also like with lots of clients, where this fear develops of like, I don't feel ready to have penis and vagina sex. I'm actually really scared of like how it's going to feel. Am I going to be in pain? Actually, I still feel pain, but I feel pressure, not necessarily from your partner, but sometimes we just feel pressure, like, oh, we should be getting back to penis and vagina sex because that's what you do as a, heterosexual cisgendered couple, right? And so knowing that actually you don't have to, there's alternatives. And working up to that intimacy can be about holding hands and just like being together, being in the same room, when sometimes with a newborn, even that's hard, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes you're like switching shifts, right? And like someone's with the baby during the day and someone's with them at night, or if one's awake, the other one's sleeping, and all that. So just like getting to know each other again and getting back together as a couple, as opposed to just like parents, or just caregivers of this little human. I think that's a good first step.
Yeah.
And even taking that off the table of like, we're not going there yet, but let's build up to it. Like you said, let's hit all the bases first. I love that,
Yeah. And I think we, as a culture, like, because we have defined, and I think that is like a lot of it is in religious traditions as well. It is a lot of like, it's that sex for procreation, and there's like, there's one hole, and that kind of, penis and vagina that fits, like that's it. But we're setting ourselves up for failure, because we're just asking a lot of people to do things that they're just not ready for. And I cannot be a full participating partner because I'm just not comfortable to go there yet.
Absolutely.
And I think it's really difficult for making immediately that jump of like, I am not satisfying not only my partner, but also my own need, because I cannot do that. So now I'm almost scared to be around that person. It's just really, really difficult. Your body's changed.
Yes.
leaning into that as a couple and just saying it, okay, let's just see what do we enjoy?
Yeah.
What has changed?
Yeah.
What hasn't changed? And really not putting that many expectations on how that should look like.
Right.
Because nobody, I think, nobody is trying to have a baby 2 months after, giving birth.
Right.
I hope so. So it gives us, a lot of people that were in the fertility journey and we're like, that's the ultimate goal. It gives us a little bit of that flexibility to just say, let's just lean into what we enjoyed before and how did that look like and how our body has changed, and maybe have conversations around what pleasure means to you.
Yes.
I think is something that we just don't talk about enough. And really, it isn't for many of us, not for all of us. It is an important part of our identity. It's not something that you share with a whole lot of people in the world.
Right.
Even for those who are in alternative relationships, who are not monogamous, they're usually not people that, and even if you are, like, that's completely do it your way. I'm completely supportive of that, but really understanding that, for many people, it is still something that you share with a very limited amount of people. And it's a part of our identity that sometimes does need that interplay with another person. I'm not saying solo sex isn't great.
Right.
It's just a reaffirming of that special relationship that you have with that other person or other people.
Yeah.
I think that body part, and I love Benet and I love her work. So really do lean it, like listen to it, because I think, we're not talking enough how important that is. And when bodies change, you might be happy suddenly about parts of your body that you were not happy about before.
Yeah.
You might be feeling very blah about it all, but it's still like,
Yeah.
trying to preach body neutrality, it's still like, this is what you have to work with and it works.
Yeah. Exactly.
So go enjoy it.
Yes, absolutely. And,
Like, are you stopping eating chocolate cake because your teeth fell out? No, you're still eating it.
God forbid, Anneke. I would never stop eating chocolate cake if my teeth fell out or anything. Yeah. And again, like having those conversations and just the knowing like that you can do this differently. It doesn't
Yeah.
have to be like that pressure to do things a certain way. And knowing that if you do have fear around being intimate again and what that looks like, that's so typical, right? Like I had that fear. So many people I know had that fear of just like, what's this going to be like? And then, so that I think talking more too about those actual body changes, right? We touched on it like briefly, right? But yeah, like our genitals change shape, color, and
Smell
during pregnancy and postpartum. And, so there's that, right? It's not just about like, oh, my stomach, looks weird and it's not, back to what it was before. There's so like my breasts have changed, or they are super sensitive, or they're not as sensitive, or I'm nursing and milk is leaking, or whatever that looks like. There's so many different, there's so many changes to our body that's not just about how we look or like our overall shape and size, right? It's how we feel, like you said, how we smell, how we, what we look like. It's all of the things put together. So there's that piece too. So knowing that happens, right? That like your genitals are going to change and look different, and not necessarily forever, maybe forever, but not necessarily forever. That's normal part of pregnancy and postpartum. So even talking about postpartum, like bleeding, right? And I thought, I think whatever in the book they said, I can't even remember, maybe like 10 days to 6 weeks. And I was like, oh, okay, whatever. I bled to the day 6 full weeks, every child. And I was not expecting that. I don't know why. I think just because I only knew a few people that had kids before I did, like friends.
Mhm.
They did not bleed for 6 weeks, like a very short period of time. I was like full bleeding 6 weeks. I was so annoyed. I don't know about you.
And I had C-section, so they empty all your uterus, so there's not a lot of bleeding after. There's a little bit.
Right.
So, but I do notice, like, even when it comes to periods and that bleeding, that we're not talking enough about it, because I do hear so many people that they would say, "Oh, I got my period at 6 weeks, and then it disappeared for like a year," and I'm just like, yeah, that's not a period. That still falls under that 6 weeks,
Yes.
and it's constantly that narrative of like, "Oh my gosh, I got my period." Like, it's almost we frame things in concepts that we understand,
Right. Right.
and it is not always accurate with like like, not that it's important, the medical thing, but I think just the expectations that we put on each other. Like, with one kid, I did not have a period for 22 months.
Wow.
22 months that and then afterwards my periods changed a lot too.
Yeah. Same. Same.
We can do like a similar whole topic on that. This is how periods have changed.
Totally.
And it's partly age. I'm aware of that now as well, that periods don't really stay the same from the moment you get your first period, say at 13 or 12 or 14, or maybe you were 16. It doesn't stay the same until you go into menopause, which is ages away for us, Christine, but like,
Of
closer
course.
probably than it is, but it doesn't really stay the same. But I think pregnancy and birth really accelerates
Oh,
some of these changes.
yeah. For me,
And
yeah.
I have to say, like, periods are really different now. And in the first period, after not having had a period, it almost felt like a relief. There was like a kind of like a buildup in my body that I was just like, I cannot let go of this.
Yes.
And I'm also a person that I hear a lot of people saying, like, I'm taking the pill, I'm not having periods anymore, or I kind of need periods in my life from time to time to just
Yeah.
let it go. I'm not like a huge period fan. I'm not one who celebrates it and goes dancing in the moon and whatever. Like, but I do. I'm also not a person that thinks it's sacred or anything, but I do feel that there is some kind of purpose to
Right. Yeah.
having a flow. I don't know.
Yeah. And it's interesting because, yeah, for me, I mean, I started having my kids at 25. So
I was 26, so hey,
like,
good for us. Yeah.
I was pregnant at 25, gave birth at 26. So like in terms of like, I think today's standards, I was pretty young.
Hmm.
And I had my third by the time I was 31. So like fairly
Yeah.
young, right?
I had my third at 31 too, and then like,
Oh my,
yeah, and then 30, 34 with the last one because it's 2.5 years, whatever. Yeah,
right.
yeah.
So, I mean, obviously, yes, there's changes with age and in that time. However, for me, as a pretty like small window of time, like, for you too, right?
Mhm.
But, and my periods changed drastically.
Yeah,
And again, we can do a separate episode, but just relating this to like how having babies impact, our bodies. Like it got to the point where my periods were insanely heavy, which they never were before. And I found it got progressively worse after each kid,
yeah,
where like the pain, the cramping
yeah,
was like labor cramps, where I would be driving and the pain was going down to my knees. I had to breathe. I had to like, again, kind of like coach myself through labor of like breathing and managing the pain. And it was terrible. And so, you know, it again, big impacts on our body, right? Yeah, maybe my
yeah,
periods would have changed like that over time without kids. I obviously I don't know, but that felt pretty related. And
yeah,
and I found too, even which I didn't fully get, but like this, whatever symptoms I had during pregnancy, I found them worse with every kid. I don't know.
yeah,
Did you?
yeah. So I was with my last pregnancy. It was so bad that I went to the OBGYN,
Mhm.
and she said, "Here, you have a sheet. I called, the hospital has a bed, you can go lay there. I want you to rest. And I said, no, I can't. I have 3 kids at home. And my husband was working that time, like shifts till 9 o'clock. And he said, no, I can take time off. And I was just like, yeah, you can take time off, but for how long? It's not going to be sustainable. The kids are not going to react well to it. And I kept going. And I don't know what like, it's not something I'm particularly proud of. It's not something that I really want to say, hey, people do this.
Mhm.
I think it was really, really not a smart decision of me, but it just really speaks of, I think, how as a society we have been trained to just keep going and just say, okay, yeah, difficult. I will lay down like 5 minutes extra every day. No worries. I can still do the cooking. I will just, you know, not cut onions anymore. Like the weirdest things that you come up with, but you're still making the same meal, but you're just like, oh no, I'm cutting out. Like,
Yes.
and you're still doing all the work. And it was very interesting to me that the doctor really told me, I have no concerns about the baby. The baby's doing well. It's probably doing really, really well because you're really struggling.
Yeah.
But I'm really concerned to you. And then I went to the hospital for my scheduled C-section. And then the nurse came to me and she said, I don't think you can give birth, because they told me like we can induce you before, like, or not induce you, planned C-section, schedule it for earlier.
Right.
I had one child who came 10 days scheduled C-section prior to her birthday or due date.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm not doing that again, because kid came out and was not like fully developed, like all hairy and stuff, and like was not ready.
Yeah.
And the thing is that I went to the hospital to give birth, and then they said, you cannot give birth today. Like the NICU is full. And then the OBGYN, she came in and she's like a woman that does like that. And she said, you're giving birth today. Are you kidding me? And she said, no, like you had 3 kids. None of them had like even risk to go to the NICU. If that happens, they will deal with it. But you're giving birth. Because she said, I don't want you. Like you pushed yourself. Like, I don't want you. And I want to say as well, I hear a lot of people talking very bad sometimes about OBGYN and this. I don't think I would have thrived with a midwife. I just tell me what I need to know.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't need a therapist when I'm going to doctor's appointments.
Right.
Just give me,
Straight.
take care of your sugar intake.
Yeah.
Maybe you could move a little bit more. I want you to do an extra ultrasound. That's what I wanted.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes we have to be more okay with that as a society as well, because the weirdest things that people feel kind of shamed into, that they will come to appointments and saying, or like sessions that I'm doing in groups, oh, I actually like my OBGYN, but I feel I cannot tell people because everybody is so happy with their midwife. Or,
Right.
I did not want to have like a elaborate birth plan because I just wanted the baby out.
Right.
I didn't really care. And I trusted my partner to just help me guide in that. And they were fine with it. It's not, and I think a lot of these things don't stop from birth trauma happening or having other kind of like a negative experience. It can help if you need it. But I think for a lot of people, you can have a midwife and a horrible birth. You can have an OBGYN and an okay birth. It's really what you want and what you need support with. And I think, not taking everything what everybody says constantly as, okay, this is my yardstick now as well, because everybody is taking maternity pictures. I don't feel beautiful, so don't take the maternity pictures.
Yeah. And that's the key, is like going with what it is that you want, that you feel is right for you and your family. That's the key. And it goes both ways, whether it's an OB or a midwife, whatever the case may be, it's go with what works for you and like you do you, right? Like, I think those things are super important. And so just we just have a couple minutes left, but what are some things you feel we didn't touch on, or things that you want people to know, like this happens, can happen during pregnancy and postpartum? or delivery?
I think the most important thing is that you're probably not the only one. Whatever you're experiencing, you're not the only one. And if you feel that you can, do open up. A pelvic floor we didn't talk about today.
Yes. Oh my gosh. See, there's so much, so much.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
And a lot of, like, I think a lot of our just bodily discomfort, and I know that, like, that body dysphoria is really a gender related thing, but I think for a lot of people going through pregnancy, there is definitely, as I'm not, again, I really want to be careful of not saying like this is on the same level, but there's just not another word for it. I think that body dysphoria thing, postpartum and during pregnancy, not understanding how your body works, feeling really not at home in your body, while you previously might be really felt like confident and understood your body. And, I've lived with this body for 25, maybe 40 years, and I got it, and I knew my strengths, and suddenly I don't have core muscles anymore. I never had. So
Me neither.
I don't miss
I
nothing,
didn't
but
miss them because I never had them.
no, it's
Still
just
don't.
I'm very weak. But I think that is just a few of the things, like periods we haven't really touched on, like in the whole fertility journey of like that not quote unquote functioning of your body, and the shame and the discomfort and the literal pain that you go through.
Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of the sex part also that I still feel that we have, could elaborate on, but I trust Benet. She probably did an amazing job on that. But I feel that there's just so much left, and I think we're doing such a good job, I think, especially after the pandemic, focusing on mental health.
Yep.
But sometimes we're disconnecting it again from
The physical.
how are you feeling in your body.
And those physical things can have
Mhm.
such a huge impact on our mental health, right?
Yeah.
I will
Yeah.
say, yes, go to a pelvic floor therapist, even if you never have or you don't think that anything went wrong
Yeah.
or is an issue. I was like, oh, my labor and deliveries were easy. Like I didn't have tearing. Yes, I had big babies, but like everything went well until, 10 years after having 3 kids. And then all of a sudden things are not going well with my bladder. And I was like, what is happening? And there's a pelvic issue there. So it's like, I could have maybe dealt with that 10 years prior, but also like that wasn't really a thing that when I
No.
was having my kids, um, the other,
Yeah, or the people that say I cannot go on a trampoline anymore, and I'm just like, yeah, but that's not
that's
normal.
not normal. Exactly.
No, but we normalize
We
it. Like,
normalize.
oh my gosh, now I'm like sneezing and I'm always peeing my pants. Yeah, go see somebody. That is not
No,
normal.
you don't have to live with that. Just FYI.
And the other thing is that a lot of people who don't talk about mental health will talk about the physical aspects. And we are missing that as a society. So somebody who says, I'm always tired, somebody who says, I'm always having headaches, somebody who's, it might be, and please, for those of you who are maybe doctors or are seeing people or have friends, ask them about their mental health.
Yes.
Go into that, because I think that is something that we don't, as a society, we're just like, oh no, she just has headaches or she's always tired. But once we put a label on that as postpartum depression or whatever, that may be, that it might be easier. Like, not saying that labels are important. Oh, it's so difficult, Christine, to say it right. But, to understand that it might have a mental health component there might actually be really helpful for us to understand what's going on.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Anneke. We will
Thank you
talk.
for having me.
Yes, it was amazing. And I hope people get stuff out of this and ask questions, just being honest and open, and people to ask questions. They can ask us, they can reach out to us or anyone around them, just ask, like, did you experience this? What is this? Do you know what this is? Is this normal? What's happening?
And you matter. Your body matters. It doesn't always have to, but the baby is okay. No.
Yeah, you matter.
If you're having a hard time, if you're experiencing pain, discomfort, that's valid.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you, my friend. I look forward to recording more with you, and we'll talk soon.
I want to do that.
Yay. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. Please share this podcast with any of your friends or family members who may benefit from it. If you feel you are experiencing any of the symptoms or issues that we discussed today, please reach out to any one of your supports or go to perinatalwellbeing.ca for more information, blog posts, podcast episodes, and ways to connect with us. Check out our new episode every other Monday.